After the destruction of Almaden in the early years of the world, the Valar fled to the land of Aman and settled Valinor, raising the Pelori Mountains to wall off their territory. The northeast, Araman, and southeast, Avathar, were left outside, and so the south became a refuge for the Ungoliant and Melkor when they hid from the Valar, and the north became a passage through which they could reach Helcaraxe and escape to Middle-earth. Yet where both Araman and Avathar were barren wastelands, Valinor was a land of beauty and wonder. There were the pastures of Yavanna, the woods of Orome, the halls of Nienna, the halls of Mandos, the Isle of Este, the gardens of Lorien, the mansions of Aule, and the mansions of Manwë and Varda upon Taniquetil, the tallest mountain in the world. For a time, the two trees of Valinor, Telperion and Laurelin, stood shining with gold and silver light, and surrounding them were the wells of Varda, which collected the dew and rains falling from the trees. There is also the city of Valimar, where many of the Valar and Maiar resided, as well as the house of Tulkas and the halls of Orome. The city of Tirion upon the hill Tuna is where the Noldor king resided over his kind. The city of Alqualonde, home of the Falmari, also called Teleri, who would make their home on the coast to pursue their love of the sea. Formenos, the great northern fortress, was located in the mountains outside Valinor, built as a refuge for Feanor during his exile. For many years, Tol Eressëa stood in the middle of the Sea Belegier until Ulmo moved the island and used it to ferry the elves of Middle-earth to the Undying Lands. Afterwards, the Maiar Osse fixed the island off the coast of Aman in the Bay of Eldamar, where it became home to many of the Teleri elves. Protecting the lands of Aman from the adventurers of the east, the Enchanted Isles were raised around Tol Eressëa, and for many years they prevented voyages west, until Eärendil and Elwing, with the aid of a Silmaril, found a passage to Aman, and with the permission of the Valar, entered the Undying Lands. In the north, the ice mountains of Helcaraxe served as a land bridge between Middle-earth and Aman. It was used by Melkor after the destruction of the two trees to escape the Valar into the lands of the east. Later, the Noldor elves under Fingolfin used the pass to reach Middle-earth after being abandoned by Feanor and his followers. But the frozen wasteland of Helcaraxe was harsh, and most of those following Fingolfin did not survive the journey. At the end of the First Age, when Beleriand was destroyed, Helcaraxe was lost, separating the two continents forever. The War of Wrath, which saw the destruction of Beleriand, saw a great displacement of the tribes of men who had fought for the Valar against Morgoth for many years, and so they were rewarded with a new homeland. The island of Númenor was raised in the middle of the Sea of Belegier. It became home to the House of Beor, the House of Haleth, and the House of Marak, which combined to become the Edain, or the Men of Westerness, and whose descendants would be known as the Dunedain. These men, gifted with long life, ruled for many years in peace and grew rich and prosperous. But after the whispers of Sauron convinced Ar-Pharazôn to abandon the light, the king of Númenor rallied his armies and sailed west to destroy the Valar and gain immortality. Instead, they were destroyed in the attempt, and Ilúvatar, the lord of all creation, sank Númenor into the sea in reprisal, breaking the world and lifting the lands of the west above the rest of the world. The rest of Arda curved into a sphere with east and west connected by the sea. The Undying Lands were now unreachable by any save for the elves, who were taught a unique path that would lead them into the heavens. They called it the Straight Road. Though the lands of Middle-earth were often under siege by the forces of the Dark Lords, many great and powerful civilizations rose and flourished on the continent. In the land once known as Beleriand, the elves established great cities and realms such as Doriath, the kingdom of the Sindar elves, led by King Thingol and his wife Melian the Maiar. Another branch of the Teleri in the Lyquendi or Green Elves settled in the lands of Ossiriand, later known as Lindon. The Noldor elves would establish the legendary realms of Hithlum, Gondolin, and Nargothrond. The human house of Beor settled the fief of Ladros. The house of Haleth settled in the forest of Brethil, while the house of Marak made their home in Dorlomen. 3 dwarven clans also settled in Beleriand, with the Broadbeams founding the great city of Belegost in the Blue Mountains, and the Firebeard clan constructing the city of Nogrod nearby. The dwarves of Durin's folk settled in the Misty Mountains, founding Khazad-dûm. Melkor, later known as Morgoth, would use Angband in the north and Utumno in the east as staging grounds for war. Later Mordor would also be used primarily by Sauron in later ages. After the War of Wrath, Beleriand was destroyed and many of the great realms of elves and men were lost. The human survivors of Numenor would settle in the lands of Gondor and Arnor in Eriador, which would later fracture into 3 kingdoms in Arthedain, Rhudaur, and Cardolin. The Lady of Light, Galadriel, and her husband Celeborn ruled the Noldor realm of Eregion until its fall at the hands of Sauron, when the survivors fled to Lothlorien, Rivendell, and Lindon. In the remains of Osiriand, Lindon was founded by Gil-galad as a home to the Noldor and Sindarin elves. Lothlorien was founded by the Nandorin elves and later taken over by Galadriel and Celeborn after the fall of Eregion, and the land was populated by Noldor, Sindarin, and Sylvan elves. Rivendell was founded by Elrond as a refuge for the survivors of Eregion, and would become one of the great opponents to Sauron in the Wars of the West. The Greenwood, later known as Mirkwood, would also become a home for the Sylvan elves under King Oropher, who founded the Woodland realm. The Greyhavens were a port city built by the elves to serve as a hub for ships traveling west to Aman. The descendants of the Atanari, men who did not cross the Blue Mountains into Beleriand, would become the Northmen that would inhabit the lands of Dale and Rohan. The lands of Rohan were once populated by Dunlendings until they were pushed west into the lands of Bree and Dunland by the Eotheod, who would later become the Rohirrim, or Eorlingas. The dwarves of Durin's folk continued to live in the Misty Mountains until an attack from a Balrog forced them to flee, though they would later recover their homeland. Durin's folk would also settle the Grey Mountains, Blue Mountains, Erebor, and Iron Hills, though they would suffer many hardships at the hands of dragon and orc attacks, being forced to abandon many of their holdings. The hobbits of Middle-earth migrated from the valley of the Anduin River to the lands of the Shire in the west. Further to the east were the lands of Rhûn and the realm of the Easterlings, who would come to serve both Dark Lords in their wars. It is also where the Blue Wizards presumably traveled in their mysterious mission in service to the Valar and against the rise of Sauron. Also following Sauron were the Variags, from the lands of Khand, southeast of Mordor. Further to the south in the lands of Harad and Farharad were the Haradrim, great warriors who fought on Olifants and would serve Sauron in the Third Age as enemies of Gondor. It was also home of the Trollmen, a ferocious race that would also serve the Dark Lord. Separated from Middle-earth during the marring of the world by Morgoth in the early wars against the Valar, the Darklands of the far south were largely uninhabited, though they may have once been populated by Wildmen and Numenorian colonies during their Golden Age. Finally, there are the uninhabited lands of the Far East, known as the Land of the Sun. This continent is home to a great mountain range called the Wall of the Sun, and while no known settlement existed, Numenorians may have visited the continent during their age of exploration.